Okay, we ready to call to order, get the meeting going? I think everybody's ready IT wise, and we don't know if Michael's joined us. Okay.
You're doing a great job, Chairman.
Thank you. Hey, that's Vice Chairman to you. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. This is a notice of the June 3rd, 2021 meeting of the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners was posted to the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners website on August 20th. And Maria, do you need to make a statement of necessity?
I do not need a statement of necessity because we have a physical quorum, so I know you guys are happy about that.
I just wanted to hear you say that.
Yes. Thank you for allowing me that moment.
was awesome.
It feels really good.
That was great. Okay, let's do a roll call. Here.
Here.
Here. Pleasure to be here. Live and in person here. Here.
Okay. All right. Well, just a couple of things before we get started down the list. Everybody knows how to work their mute buttons now after doing Zoom calls for the last year and a half. So feel free to use your mute button on the microphone. And one thing that we've got some board members here who I guess came on new during the pandemic. When we have discussion and you're ready to speak, turn your name tags up like this, and hopefully somebody will punch me and let me know, that somebody's ready to speak. And it'll fall down. Everybody on the board has had it fall down, and it makes the loudest noise in mankind's history. But that everybody's done that, so that's the way to do it. And we try to follow Robert's rules, but when that fails, we follow Robert Campbell's rules. So he'll tell us about that. Okay, and we need to acknowledge guests here today.
Good morning. I'm Chris Gwaltney. I am representing ASCE Nashville branch and Tennessee section, just as an observer. What's going on? So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Chris is invaluable to helping out the engineers on the board. Okay. Has everyone reviewed the agenda for changes and additions? I have a motion. Do I need a motion to accept the agenda or no?
Hello.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Done this in a long time.
It's like a practice. That's a little practice motion. Okay, did everyone review the April minutes that were sent to us? We'll need a motion to approve those meeting minutes. There,
Second.
Tony, any discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Meeting minutes are approved. Feels weird not doing a roll call. That's kind of nice. So, okay, professional society reports. I don't think anybody's tied in WebEx wise.
This is Nathan. I'm here.
Okay,
Ashley Cates is here too.
great.
Casey's here.
All right, we do have
Y'all wouldn't
professional
let us
society
come in the
reports.
building.
So, Nathan, since you spoke up first, why don't you go first?
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm halfway here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. I guess the biggest news item is that our legislative friends have adjourned for the year. They finished their work for the session on May the 5th and are expected to return on January the 11th of next year, barring a special session in the summer or fall to deal with recovery funds. No real word on that yet. The governor would like for them not to appear. Some legislative folks would like to appear. The most important bill is always the budget. Surprisingly, for a pandemic, Tennessee's economics worked well. The revenues were exceeded forecast, and for a change, instead of bonded indebtedness, we funded some capital projects with cash, which, as an old Tennessean, I'm not sure I've seen that before. Probably the most significant bill that would affect the design professional community was one dealing with construction materials brought by our a coalition headed largely by the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce and Industry and with strong support from the Home Builders Association. It ended up probably affecting local governments and how they adopt ordinances and regulations and dealing with construction materials more than it affects the design professional community. And for y'all new to the board, this sort of goes back to the age-old conflict that home builders have with local governments about, usually it's exterior things. It's bricks versus vinyl, but the bill was written so broadly that it covers more than that. We worked closely with the local governments to craft some amendments to help our professions. None of the professions, I won't let them speak for themselves, but we're really happy with it, but we just decided to hold our nose. We did get one of our amendments adopted, so we're pleased by that. That bill took effect on May 4th, 2021. It's Public Chapter 332. The other big news item that the landscape architects are more specifically excited about is their national conference is coming to Nashville, and it's going to be like your meeting today, live and direct, and they're pumped. It's going to be November 19th through the 22nd. Registration opens on June the 24th for registration and for housing. So that's a big news item. We'll continue to update you on that as we get closer to it. But thanks for your time. Happy to respond to any questions this morning. Thanks again.
Thank you, Nathan. Informative as always. Any questions for Nathan? Okay, hearing none. Ashley, how about you next?
Thank you. Ashley Cates, I'm Executive Vice President of AIA Tennessee. Essentially echoed Nathan's report that he had. We are ecstatic about the capital investment for the improvements and projects that was included in the budget. We are also excited about, for several years, we've been working on a historic tax credit. And this year, the governor put funding in the budget for a historic development grant. And so it's essentially the backbone. We worked with the administration, and the backbone of the program is how I kind of crafted the language for the program to work. So we're super excited about it. The first year, and we anticipate that there will be funding over the next couple of years. And so from what I understand right now, the grants are open and people are applying. And so we're excited about that. To be able to preserve our historic buildings across the state. So other than that, we have our conference coming up at the end of August, virtual conference this year. We just couldn't pivot enough, the keyword pivot, or the buzzword for this year, to go back to a live conference. But we are going to have a live celebration at the end of October in Nashville to celebrate architecture and design. And so we'll have more information as we get closer in, but that's essentially it. It's a pretty short, sweet report today.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Any questions for Ashley? Okay, Casey.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being remote for allowing us in remotely because I am remote today. I'm Casey Anderson. I'm the executive director of the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers and the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee. Appreciate Nathan's update. I will just add, for the sake of the engineers in the room, the materials bill that he was talking about, we were able to add an amendment on it that codifies the fact that nothing in that materials bill can affect anything in the mechanical, plumbing, any of the discretion of the licensed design professional regarding mechanical, electrical, or plumbing. So we were just trying to protect the guts of the building at that point. I am in the process of setting up times to get around the state. We followed about 300 bills this year and ended up working on 70, a little over 70. So there's a lot to share and a lot of things that do affect our engineers. So I'll be getting around the state to make sure everybody hears that message. We're excited to be getting back to normal as well. Normal being a stretch, but a little bit more normal. Our Tennessee Engineers Conference is going to be in person September 12th to 14th at the Franklin Marriott. That's a joint conference between ACEC, TSPE, ASCE, and TSEA, the structural engineers. So really excited about that. We typically have, I think we'll end up with 6 tracks this year, 6 specialized tracks, and making sure that we've got enough space in there and all of that. So excited to be back there. Both of my boards, ACEC and TSPE, are doing their planning sessions this month, June 17th and 18th for ACEC, June 21st and 22nd for TSPE. And a lot of what you all have been talking about this year, we will at least be addressing just to talk about, but excited to really put them on a plan of now that we can sort of function again differently, where we need to go with that. And both groups are thinking very strategically and about the profession and the industry as a whole. So I'm excited about that. We are going to do our first ever, ACEC will be doing our first ever Steel Bridge Forum, which is very timely in regards to bridge safety for the state of Tennessee. But it's an ACEC event that is also hosted with the Steel Bridge Institute of America and CEDA. So excited about that. That will be October 14th. ACEC Fall Conference nationally, back in person in Marshall Island. I would encourage you all to attend. It's going to be fantastic. October 26th to 31st. Our Engineering Excellence Awards are November the 4th. I feel like all I'm doing right now is event planning, which is not quite the case, but there's a lot going on, and we're excited for everybody to be back together. And the last thing I'll share is that I'm serving on ACEC's National Planning Cabinet right now. There are about 8 of us. And really an honor to be a part of that. But one of the pieces both ACEC and NSPE are looking at is not just diversity and inclusion, but what are we doing about the future, and how are we developing the next generation of engineers, and how we can be a part of affecting that. So I know that's something that you all look at from time to time, and would welcome your input at any time. And I will be quiet and just say I appreciate y'all always having us.
Yeah, great report, Casey. Thank you, and everyone. Any questions for Casey? Don't see any. And Don Baltimore usually gives a report. Is Don on the line?
Yeah, yes, I am. I'm joined. Thank you. Yes. Again, this is Don Baltimore, General Counsel and Lobbyist for the Tennessee IDEA, which stands for Tennessee Interior Design, Education, and Advocacy. And I'll just say ditto to everything that's been said before. We're excited about what legislation's passed and what we managed to amend or defeat for a while, and enjoyed working with the other groups. We're really excited about the historic tax credit and can't wait to see how that works. And we, as interior designers and associations, are anxious to get back to meeting in person and having our conventions and forums in person. Also glad the board's back in person. Can't wait till the association's representatives can be there too, along with the public. So that's all I have today.
Great. Thank you, Don. Any questions for Don? None? Okay. Well, that concludes our professional society reports. Let's move on to the legal case report.
Good morning. Good to see everybody. Start the legal report with first one is 2021-016-031. On September 22nd, 2020, complainant signed a contract with respondent. Accompanying the contract was a deposit of $5,400. Contract contains the specifics to be provided pursuant to payment. On December 19, 2020, complainant was required by contract to provide another $3,600 subsequent to respondent acquiring a building permit. In late January of 2021, complainant terminated the contract, having allegedly received nothing from respondent for the now $9,000 that was deposited. Complainant believes respondent is operating a fraudulent business for the purpose of obtaining large deposits in an effort to obtain a refund and not intent of not performing services. Complainant also has filed a lawsuit against respondent in an effort to obtain a refund of the $9,000. Respondent denies the allegations and explains that the complainant was referred to them by its subcontractor providing siding and deck services to complainant. As part of the design-build agreement, the complainant paid a $5,400 deposit that would cover time and effort to create a set of drawings that respondent would ultimately price and build. The deposit also covered time to build and any site visits required to complete the drawings and budget. Respondent worked through the end of the year, endeavoring to produce a set of plans that were agreeable to the complainant. Complainant signed off on the, quote, final drawings multiple times only to ultimately change their mind and ask for additional revisions. Respondent made the adjustments without question. Early in 2021, respondent states they completed that what was understood to be the final drawings and generated a budget for the complainant. The budget was agreed to, and a $5,000 deposit was requested to pay a company that was to provide with certain material for the project. At that time, the complainant also shared the plans with the HOA for approval, and respondent pulled the building permit for the project. By contract, respondent was due an additional $3,600 at permitting and an additional $1,800 as a final payment towards design services. The $3,600 invoice was paid on 12/19/2020, but the $1,800 was not. Respondent continued to work with the complainant to try and finalize the design and get the project out of the ground until unexpectedly the contract was terminated by complainant on February 1st, 2021 via email. Around this time, respondent fired the subcontractor, alleging shoddy workmanship, and believes the subcontractor is slandering their business. A cease and desist order was sent to the subcontractor and request for damages. Respondent provided a great deal of work product showing the hours acquired. Respondent believes they acted in good faith and there is no fraud being conducted. The review did not find any violations by respondent, and this matter seems to be a personal issue. This was reviewed by board member Brian Tibbs. The mitigating factors of no violations found. Recommendation is to close.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that we close this
Okay. Motion.
issue of trying to think of the right word.
Oh,
Close.
okay.
I move to close.
Which would be to agree with the recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Let's take a vote. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Before you get started, sir, let me apologize to Rob. I deprived you of the privilege of having your first in-person
please
second. And I'm sorry. I should have deferred to you in your first in-person meeting for that. Couldn't help myself.
sweet, but don't.
Number 2, 2021-023-511. Respondent self-reported practicing on an expired license. Respondent failed to renew the license in 2018 and during the expired time provided civil engineering plans, grading and drainage, street, roadway plans, sanitary sewer, traffic control, foundation inspections, and construction and detail plans as an employee of an engineer firm and then as a city engineer after April 1st, 2020 up to renewal. Specifically, the respondent reported providing design, plans, and construction details for 6 subdivision projects, along with engineering inspection letters for 9 subdivisions related to the foundations for various home sites. This was reviewed by board member Alton Heathcote. Mitigating factors is self-reported, no complaints associated with services provided. The aggravating factors is providing engineering services on expired license. Recommendation is authorize a civil penalty in the amount of $3,000 for the 6 subdivision plans sealed and $900 for the inspection letters provided, for a total civil penalty of $3,900, and pass the laws and rules exam.
Okay. Here, a motion.
I'll move.
Move, just to clarify, move to
I move to
accept the recommendation.
The recommendation from Mr. Heathcote.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. All right, any discussion? All right, we vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Number 3, 2021-011-441. Complainant inquired about respondent's license when noticing that it expired in December 2017. Respondent stated they did not know that it expired. Respondent established an architect business in July of 2020 while the license was expired. Respondent has since renewed the license in February of 2021. Although respondent prepared projects that did not require a seal while the license was expired, he did start an architecture business. On the business website, respondent stated he was lead architect and offering full architectural services while license was expired. It's reviewed by board member Frank Wagster. Mitigating factors are no plans required to be sealed while license was expired. Aggravating factors is listed appellations of architect and offered architectural services on business website while license was expired. Recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $500 for offering architectural services while license was expired, and pass the laws and rules exam.
Stewart, is there a motion?
I move to accept the recommendation.
Second?
A second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Blair?
This individual.
You might have your.
It's been a while. Sorry. I'll start over. This individual opened up an architectural firm. Was he the only professional, licensed professional in the firm?
Yes. Yeah, kind of the backstory on this is this person worked for a firm that, to his knowledge, were renewing his license, paying his, fees and all this stuff. For about, this started in 2017, but for several years, and then he left the company. And he was still under the impression that they had kept his license up. In fact, in his response, he says they told him they had. But, after he had left the company, he decided to start his own firm, just a, single person firm. And so he set up a website that, like this says he's the lead architect, and he has some photographs of work I'm assuming he was involved in previously, but these were not small buildings or anything. These were, fair-sized buildings. He had not sealed anything while he worked at that company because apparently the principals of the firm did the sealing. And the only projects he had done since he left were very small, like addition to a house, that type of thing, and not that don't require a seal. So I couldn't find anything that he had done, sealing plans that he wasn't supposed to, or while he wasn't licensed or anything like that. But the main thing is how do you start an architectural company and not review yourself and see that you weren't licensed? Seems far-fetched to me, but apparently that's what he did. And then he finally did get his license back in February of this year. So, Alton or Robert.
I've got two questions. One is I find it really hard to believe that in 7 months, if I were in that situation and I went 7 months and all I got to do was a little building expansion for a home somewhere, I'd probably be looking for a job with another firm. I find it hard to believe that he didn't have a job where he used his seal on anything, one, which I know we don't have that information, so all you can do is go off of what you've got available to you.
I've got a response to that. Apparently, the firm he had started was architecture and photography. So he was doing architectural photography also.
Okay.
So and again, I don't know this, but I'm assuming his income that he did get probably came from that, not from.
The second part of the question is, in addition to renewing his license, if he started a firm, did he also register his corporation?
That didn't
come up, but I mean, we could look it up.
That would also be a violation. Correct?
Yes. Without a firm disclosure form.
Correct.
Right.
All right. Thank you,
and
Mr.
that I
Vice
don't
Chair.
know the answer to. Yeah. If he did, I don't know how he could have done it without being licensed.
And I'm not going to. I think your recommendation is fine. I do think we ought to probably maybe postpone it to see about this firm disclosure thing or something, just to get an answer to that instead of closing it right now. But the other thing I kind of find a little, first off, the company. I mean, what obligation then does this? I mean, if the company tells you that they're renewing your license, isn't there some sort of ethical issue with that? I would think. I mean,
As far as I'm concerned, there is. Yeah.
I mean, I would think there's something there that maybe we ought to at least ask another question to that company. Number two, once you get to a certain project size, I don't see how two principals can stamp all the drawings underneath them and still maintain control on them. I mean, that's just me. I would find it hard to do in my firm, and I don't.
I mean, we don't. The firm that I'm in, whoever is responsible for it, the architect signs it, and it's not necessarily a principal. But I have heard that there are firms that the principal is the only people, or the principals are the only people that seal the drawings. I've heard that.
And I get that, but then that means they have to be in responsible charge and really into the weeds on that design process, which, talking about complex buildings, it seems like he was not building just little things while he was with the former. That just seems hard to do, and maybe somebody else has got it figured out, but I don't know.
I know, and again, we're not a huge firm. The big firms, I think, usually have a principal in charge of each project, and that would be the person that sealed the drawings. I'm assuming. I don't know that.
Other
Albert, for what it's worth, I have worked with architectural firms over 150 people, and one person the president of the firm stamps everything that they do. And for what it's worth, I'm not going to name
I'm
names,
saying no.
but I just know that practice is, common among architects, and not just in Tennessee. I mean, Texas and other places.
That just seems a little. I mean, I know projects we work on are not unbelievably complicated, but I mean, we let people. I'll stamp something every once in a while but I've had to review it, and I just don't see how you can do it on fairly complicated projects. But again, maybe that's the way they're structured. And
Often wonder about that, but seen it forever.
I agree. I've seen that practice, and I agree with Robert's comment that I think it's stronger when the person who is actually doing the responsible charge of design stamps the drawings. So, good point. Alton.
Yeah, one last question. I don't, in the interest of trying to get this resolved today, if it's possible, can we find out how long would it take to find out whether or not they filed the firm disclosure report?
I've already looked it up. He didn't.
So maybe we should consider amending the recommendation to include that as well. Frank, I'm asking you. I mean, that's a sort of a second violation.
It is. You've got a good point, and I agree. I think that should be a part of it. I'm not remembering who made the motion. Want to assist in how we would add to the motion for a ban.
I think the way it's crafted right now, authorize a civil penalty of $500 for offering architectural service while the license was expired, and a authorize a civil penalty of $500 for failing to file the appropriate firm disclosure form and pass the laws and rules exam.
Okay, so that's a request for an amended motion. Ben, is that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. All right, we have an amended motion. Do we need to repeat the motion, or did you get that, Wanda? Did we get the motion down, or Stuart? You got it. Okay. All right, any other discussion? Okay, we are ready for a vote then. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Number 4, 2021-020-931. Complainant states a county was bidding HVAC replacement for public buildings and alleges an unlicensed individual prepared bid documents for the county to use. Respondent states they were solicited by the county to prepare bid specifications to obtain bids for HVAC replacement at various schools. Bid specifications for newspapers, the ads, were also prepared and allegedly signed by a registered engineer. After reviewing it, it was determined that the firm has a Tennessee business license, employs a registered engineer, but has not filed a firm disclosure form with the board. The specifications were not stamped by the registered engineer. The engineer only signed the cover letter submitted with the specifications and newspaper ad. More concerning is that the specifications lack to be complete and leave many things up to a contractor and supplier. A redacted copy of the specifications and the advertisement was submitted in the meeting packet and will be discussed as new business, but we're not going to discuss it as new business. I think we're going to discuss it during the time after the motion. It was reviewed by board member Robert Campbell. Mitigating factors, registered engineer employed with the firm. Aggravating factors, no firm disclosure form filed, and the specifications were not stamped and incomplete. The recommendation is authorize a civil penalty for failure to file a firm disclosure form in the amount of $500 and a civil penalty for failure to stamp the specifications in the amount of $500 for a total civil penalty of $1,000 and pass the laws and rules exam.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay, discussion? Any questions, comments?
I have one question.
Yeah.
What was the redacted copy? I mean, what do you redact?
The county and the name of the. Yeah. That's what was redacted.
Or I
No worries.
didn't see it in my package.
No worries.
I wasn't sure if this was coming from Washington D.C. or if it
Well,
was something
kind of,
local.
sort of, kind of.
Thank you.
Anybody else's? Robert, I'd like to just know if you've got anything.
I mean,
more
I
to
think
add.
what we have is fine. They did have a business license from the state of Tennessee. I mean, from the comptroller's office, whatever, the department, state department. Anyway, they had that, so that was fine. But they didn't have a firm disclosure form, and we're offering engineering. So as we've discussed, you have to have firm disclosure form. The second thing, the only thing that was stamped by it, they did have an engineer on staff. But the only thing that engineer on staff stamped was basically a proposal letter or a cover letter that had all the other, had these specifications and quote specification. I'm going to air quote that, I reckon, but that in it. And our laws clearly states that you're supposed to stamp the specifications themselves or the index to that specification, not the cover letter submitting everything to the owner. And again, we can talk about this later, but I really doubt the specifications to me don't pass muster. But that's not part of what we're discussing right now, but I do want to discuss that at some point. So anyway, they were in violation of those two things. No firm disclosure, and the specifications were not stamped. But
Robert, the purpose of you showing us the redacted RFP?
That's the bid spec.
Oh, mine says RFP. Oh, this is it? Oh.
That may be an RFP to go out to contractors. That's what I took it as.
As bid solicitation.
Yeah.
Robert, is this a form of contract?
This is engineering firm. They and in their criteria, Rob, they say they use the words provide engineering services for bid specifications. So I mean, those are two pretty concrete terms.
Chair, can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Robert, I'm concerned like you are too. The implication is that if these specifications look to be incomplete, which based on what I saw the redacted version of, I would agree with. I mean, should this also include some issue associated with competence?
Well, let's kind of got to play it as it lies right now. And I think as Stuart and I have talked, we don't usually include exhibits like this in the legal report. They're more have been verbal. So I'd rather deal with the specification thing later, and we can decide at that point, I think, if we think that there is some reason to open up another.
The complaint that was filed was just for practicing without sealing or drawing.
Yeah, the complaint that was filed was that they didn't have an engineer in the firm who had stamped the specifications. Okay, and they do have an engineer, but he did not stamp the specifications. And in further detail, they did not have a firm disclosure report. Okay, but they did not allege anything beyond that. So I kind of want to stay in what was alleged.
I guess just for a clarification of protocol, I'll ask Maria and Stuart, what's the appropriate time to take that up if there is that concern about this particular, in addition to the complaint that was lodged and an amendment to that complaint? What's the protocol for doing that?
Well, today we need to stay in the parameters of this complaint and what was alleged. Y'all can have a discussion, and if you feel like there's some other violations, then we would have to open up a new complaint.
When do we make the recommendation to open up a new complaint?
You can do it with a motion after you discuss.
Why don't we've got a motion and a second on the floor right now. We could act on that motion and then open discussion on the competence or negligence or the misconduct.
And just as before Frank, it is under new business. This thing that y'all have redacted is under new business. So again, we're trying to separate the two to not get them all confused. And so if you want to, I think let's discuss that under new business. Stuart, does that sound, that's kind of what you and I had discussed. And then if they're under new business, if we decide there's something that needs an action, then certainly we can do that under new business.
I agree with that.
I just have one short question. This has the appearances of a request for a design build. Is that not what this is?
Oh, sir.
Okay.
That's no
question.
Okay.
Just for education purposes, what's the firm disclosure form?
A firm disclosure form is every firm that has a location is supposed to have a professional engineer or a professional registered architect that is in charge of that office. So the firm discloses who that is and who's responsible for that. No, it has to be filed with this board. Also have a business license, which is filed with Secretary of State. I'll get out in a little bit. Secretary of State.
Some states have an actual license for a firm as well as the individual. In Tennessee's this disclosure form kind of acts as that firm license. You could think of it that way. Okay, all right, we've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, let's have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
That concludes the legal report.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. All right, next on the agenda is the director's report. Somebody want to give the director's report?
I apologize. I don't really have anything. I think Michael thought he may be here, so it hasn't been forwarded to me. I see the financial data is included, but as far as the grants, conferences, and the meeting dates, I do not have that information.
Okay, we did get the packet, and I don't know if any of the board members has any comment on what they've seen in terms of the financial or the grant information, conferences, or anything.
I think we do need to take up under conferences, though. Do we need to do that now or under the engineering? I think it's now, isn't it? We need to approve attendees for different conferences as based on what we discussed. And I don't think we had any landscape or architecture committee, any conferences to approve. Or it's always got a conference.
Working on it.
He has to confer.
Working on that. Thank you.
With regard to landscape architecture, we do have our national meeting here in Nashville, and there will be some expense to that. The CLARB meeting that I would normally attend is virtual this year.
Okay, so nothing for us to approve right now.
That's correct.
Did Michael say yesterday we need to wait till August to do this, or is that?
I think we need to do it now because you all need to register.
We do need to. You're right.
It's on the agenda, so I mean, it's not like it's. You know what I'm saying? It is on the agenda.
Hey, what, Steve?
Yeah, I can go ahead and give the board that information that we discussed. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say, Ricky, the August reference you were making was in regard to going to the event that Casey was talking about and given like kind of the legislative
That's
updates
right.
and stuff.
Yeah,
I agree that for the travel and everything, you
Thank
all
you.
should probably go ahead and discuss that.
Okay.
The engineers have the NCWS annual meeting coming up in New Orleans August the 18th through the 21st, and we discussed and recommended that Ricky and Bob, attend those meetings in addition to Michael. We were, NCAAS is allowing us to send 3 people, so we felt like 2 board members and our MBA would attend that meeting. So that was the engineering committee's recommendation.
I guess that serves as a motion when it comes out of a committee. Well, I think with its own second, I believe.
I can do that. I did that, huh?
You did it yesterday. That's right. So, so is there any more discussion on that? Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Steve. Anything else in the director's report to discuss? Robert.
Just a question. I noticed we have 2022 meeting dates, and I assume we don't have those quite ready, which is fine. We do have the board retreat. I noticed on my, it's in October typically. Has there been any discussion about where we have that? And we had discussed obviously in previous times about going back to a state park or something that was a little bit more off campus. So,
do we know whether or not Michael actually was able to speak to anybody about whether or not we would be allowed to do that or consider doing that? Okay. All right. I guess we can ask Michael about that in August. All right. Thank you, Wanda. All right. Thank you.
I just thought if it was somewhere, just kind of a little pre-planning, but I think there is, as we've discussed, I'm not going to try to belabor the point. I think there is value to getting off campus a little bit. We got a little bit more room to spread out. Sometimes the meeting space is a little bit more conducive to having conversations than this thing.
Particularly when we have the day we have the deans in, because the last 2 times we've done that, we haven't had sufficient room to do it, or even the right environment to do it in.
Point. Okay. Anything else under the director's report anybody wants to bring up? Okay, let's move on to committee reports. Landscape architects.
Great, thank you. We met yesterday morning at 9:00 and had I think a very productive meeting. We basically talked two different things. First and foremost, just to introduce to the committee the proposed statute changes that Maria and I have been working on for a while. Then secondly, discussion of definitions of landscape architecture. As I wear 2 hats here on the LA committee and then also the chairman of the definitions committee, we all need to get geared back up to go there. So we started that discussion in the landscape architecture committee, and some really helpful comments came out. The engineers have an individual that if there's a question about the curriculum of a university, they have an individual they go to and as a resource. And this, I think it's Dr. John Smith that looks into it and helps the board make those type of decisions. So I too, in the landscape architecture side, will be looking for someone. And I've already spoken to 2 people. No one has yet agreed because I think they're concerned about the quantity of work that could go into it. But anyway, that's one thing that came out in the discussion, and I think that following with what the engineers have done, I think that's a really wise thing. Also, I think Robert suggested that we talk to additional groups, landscape architectural groups, about our definition to make sure that as we go through this process that everybody is satisfied to a certain point, that we talk to the different groups. And I'm thinking the educators and Robert, when we were meeting yesterday, I was thinking, well, it's just the ASLA, but there are a few other groups. So you made me think about it, and I think that was a really good and helpful thing. So that was the benefit of us meeting yesterday, and I appreciate the comments. So.
Alton's got a
Yeah. Hey, Blair, just a quick notation. Wanda, I believe with Dr. Smith, I think we pay him $100 per request, correct? And do you know how often in a year's time we defer things to him on average?
I would say probably around 15 or 20 maybe.
Okay, so $1,500 to $2,000, Blair, is what we typically, and we have a lot. We get a lot of questions about that. So I don't know that you do or don't. You may have the same number as we do, but $1,500 to $2,000 a year for that sort of review process seems a great value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions for Blair? Okay, interior design, Melanie?
Thank you. We met yesterday morning as well, 10:30, and had a quorum, and had a number of topics that we discussed and addressed, one of which also was the definition of interior design. And we've had one that we reviewed that was prepared and was sort of in the hip pocket from a couple of years ago. And so the committee reviewed that. One of the primary comments was that it was quite lengthy. It was 5 pages long. And so, again, the same type of conversation, Blair, that you all had ensued with our committee, in that a shorter definition or an abridged version. This definition came from the essence of CIDQ, the Council of Interior Design Qualifications. So we were looking at that as adopting the majority of that definition, so that we would be a unified profession and would have a unified definition across the country. So what we determined, though, was that we needed a shorter version, an abridged version. It also needed to, I needed to review definitions from other states, from other professional organizations, again. And so I'm going to take all of that advice, work on a new definition, or it may be that we adopt the definition that's already been prepared. There was maybe the abridged version appears as the primary definition that is published along with the other disciplines. We were looking and we were asking Maria where the additional, the longer version or the full definition could possibly appear in some type of document within the board. We'll study on that as well. So we didn't come to a conclusion. There's still work left to be done, in the same way that I think all the other. Something else, a number of other things that we talked about, such as the stamping privileges that were once in place for interior designers a long time ago, when we were first recognized as a profession within the state as registered. And that was back when I was first registered as an interior designer. We had a stamp. It was retracted. So there is an interest now in understanding the history of how stamping privileges occurred to begin with, why they became, why they were eliminated, and what is the process, or is there a process to returning to some type that also involves studying other states. And since we are a Title Act, we are registered interior designers, it involves a whole other evaluation process to see if we can get back to that point of stamping drawings with obviously a number of restrictions, your definition of. So there's a bit of work and research to do on that. From that, copywriting deliverables, there was a very interesting discussion on copywriting deliverables for interior designers. It's our understanding that that happens often with architecture deliverables. And I don't think the professional organizations are aware that interior designers can do the same. It's not something that we're going to publish or deal with as a board, but it is something that I will probably communicate to the professional organizations of, hey, you know, this is a way to protect your design concepts and without stamping drawings or anything like that. So that was a good point to make. Another item that we discussed was clarification of a special project grant. Susan Ballard in the past had put together and organized a collaborative effort for a community service project. We wanted to have a better understanding of what that process was so that that community service project could continue. And so that's a conversation that I'll need to have with Susan Ballard and then pass that recommendation on to the grants committee as possibly, I don't know if it would be categorized as a special project or if it's just simply another opportunity to join the disciplines and the universities on a collaborative effort for a community service project. And I think one of the hot topics for the profession, and I think we all recognize that it's a bit confusing, is the term interior architecture and how it is used, and who that group or that population is. And what is happening is higher education, the university programs are simply changing the name of their program from interior design to interior architecture without modifying their curriculum. And they are asking students to sign a waiver or a disclaimer so that they understand that they cannot use the term interior architect and they are not practicing interior architecture. So it's causing some confusion, and I think we recognize, Maria indicated that it's not something really that we should handle as a board. My question is, and she clarified it as well, that our qualifications for registration as an interior designer are education, examination, and practice. The education is what is from an accredited program. CETA is our accreditation body, and CETA is allowing the interior design programs to use the term interior architecture. So I guess my question is, do we need to address that in our qualifications, education qualifications? Do we not take a position on it? Do we leave it to the professional organizations and the higher education institutes to be certain that the graduates realize that they are interior designers, and they can register to be interior designers. They cannot register to be, they cannot take the architectural examination. What is, I'm asking the board, I guess, what is your position on all of this?
Any comments from anyone? Looking at the architects on the side of the table.
Well, I guess the biggest confusion is why the CIDQ wants to do that, and apparently and I know they have big conferences and so forth like everybody else, where everybody's boards are represented. I mean, your designers are represented. Is there a push at these meetings to make that change at all? Back to
There is not.
Let's say our board just goes crazy and makes some kind of a state policy, or I guess you could do a policy that we were against doing that. But what ramifications what kind of pit are we jumping into if we do that? That would be my question.
Do we attend CIDQ conferences?
And it will be in November of this year.
Is there a forum where, I know the engineering NCEES, there's forums where Tennessee has rebelled a bit against some direction that NCEES has taken. Is there a forum to do that, to express the concern?
I'm sure there is. Since I am new to this position, this November will be the first meeting that I will be attending, and I can voice a concern at that point. I'm sure it has been expressed in the past, and it's what is happening is it is affecting the understanding of registering as interior designers in the state of Tennessee. They are not registering. Recent graduates who meet the qualifications are not registering because they perceive their education to be more than just interior design. So that's the confusion. I spoke to one of the professional organizations 2-3 months ago and tried to express this concern that there is not a licensed profession of interior architecture. If you want to sit for the exam as the NCIDQ and take the architecture exam and become registered and licensed in both, then, and if you want to call yourself an interior, but you have to have effort. Majority of time in that situation, they're going to refer to themselves as an architect.
Alton.
Thank you.
I was concentrating on that side.
I know you, man. You're focused over there.
I was.
Hey, don't forget you're an engineer.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank Mrs. Blank Nameplate for a very comprehensive and thorough report. Really well done. Thank you, Melanie. I think you asked the question, what this board would recommend and how you pursue that. And I think the consensus seems to be that go to CIDQ and ask them to petition that. But if I understand correctly, this is an initiative that's taken on by the colleges themselves in an effort to maybe, I don't want to use the word glamorize, but create more market share by using this title instead of interior design. And I don't know how much leverage CIDQ has in that. But if there is a registration process, and in Tennessee you're registered as an interior designer, and it's affecting those registrants, maybe CIDQ and
CIDA, the accreditation
yes, the
body.
CIDA could draft something to give to those universities as an official statement requesting them to modify that, because and explain why that's misleading and misrepresentative of what they're actually going to do in practice.
Very good.
Rick.
Couple of comments. I have a senior interior design intern in my office this summer. And we've had this conversation, and she is adamantly opposed to this designation. She says it's disingenuous by the university. There are some professors who are on board with her, and they think it's really is a shame that they're letting these students go down this path, even though they make them sign a form. I mean, come on, give me a break. You know, you can do this and pretend to be an architect, but you really can't be. I mean, that's silly. You know, you want to pretend to be an engineer? I mean, come on. And these students work hard at what they do. They are not architects. We all know that. But they're giving them a false impression. And even though they may sign the form, the comment about they're not registering because they don't have to. They're interior architects, if you will. From a board perspective, we can regulate people who are architects. These people are not architects. I don't know what kind of teeth we might have to do something other than to write them a letter and tell them they can't use that in their title or the name of their firm or whatever, that they decide to call it architecture or architects. That's all we can do. So this really is, you know, the university is hamstringing us. We told them, we asked them years ago that please don't do this. This is just going to confuse the issue and make it more contentious between the professions. I have attended the interior design meetings in the past, and the push from the national organization is to try to equate, and this is my read. There were 2 architects at this function, and they had legislators that spoke, and their goal was to equate interior designers to architects. But the part that they're missing, and it was discussed there, is the education requirements. A good designer is a good designer if you learn what that means in terms of whether you're an architect or an interior designer. If the qualifications are equal, well, you know, why aren't they equal? If you want to do one, you can do both. You know, there's not. It's the education process, and it's this pushing to try to fill seats at the universities. So,
a question on that, and wouldn't the exam be different between an architect?
It
and
is
an
different.
interior? So that's the other.
So you can't be one without passing that exam, but you're telling them they are that. So that's again, it's disingenuous, and I find it somewhat insulting to these kids or these young adults as they're going through college. That's a lot of money to spend on something that you can't do. So, and I'll be glad to go to another one of those conventions, because I was recognized as there's one of the enemy.
Robert.
So question then probably comes to Stuart somewhat, because I think, Rick, you brought it up a little bit. So if we've got universities that are telling people that they can use the appellation architect,
They're
no?
not. They're not. It's simply a name of the program that is creating confusion among the students and the graduates. That is then, I guess I'm trying to figure out why they just don't leave it as an interior design program. And like we spoke yesterday, there is an attraction of a different student if it's called interior architecture, but they are not modifying their curriculum. There is no professional organization that supports interior architects. There's no registration, there's no examination. So interior architecture is the term that is being used rather than interior design. So they know that they are not allowed to use the title interior architecture, but they don't want to use the title interior designer.
So wait a minute. Let me finish my thought, please. So here's the question then. I mean, isn't it what's different than that than a website offering engineering services that doesn't do engineering, or architecture that doesn't do architecture? Should we not send as a board saying, you as a program, since you're using the appellation architecture in your program, you're in violation of our code, right? Incorrect use of the word, just like we do with people that have websites, just like we do with people that have anything, and we're going to fine you. Now, open a complaint against them. I mean, again, if it's something that they're inappropriately using a title, we have a title act for that reason. And so if we've got 3 universities or colleges or whatever that are using interior architecture, they're using that word incorrectly. And I don't see the difference between the university using it incorrectly versus somebody that has a business that's using it incorrectly. Both are doing the same thing. They're harming the professions, they're harming the public and doing all that. So why don't we just send a letter saying, if you don't do it, we're going to be forced to open a complaint and fine you thousands of dollars, potentially. Or we don't have to put that, but you know what I'm saying. So that's my question, I suppose.
Thank you. And I agree with everything Robert said, and I think that I think too this board probably ought to take that position, because our laws and rules are pretty clear about misusing the appellation of any profession. But in addition to the interior design professional societies, Rick, this may be something that the architects may also want to weigh in on and provide some sort of the AIA or some other organization provide some letter cautioning them or strongly recommending that they reconsider that and rename it appropriately. I think that would probably aid the interior designers and potentially this board in supporting the removal of the appellation interior architecture. Do you think that's something that AIA would or could take up?
I think it certainly is. There are, from a professional architect's opinion versus my board opinion, we all tend to agree with what we're talking about here. What my statement is as a board member to you, my professional statement is the same. And we've talked about this in terms of what is it we can do, and everyone understands the problem is at the university level. Now, getting the AIA to write a letter recommending that they not do that, I just don't think that that's been requested yet. And as an AIA member, I can certainly discuss that with the AIA representatives, and I'll be glad to. I don't know, Frank, if you.
It seems to me that would be a valuable and important support.
Right, and I think that they look to the board to help regulate this instead of a professional membership or society. They have an opinion. They can have an opinion. They regulate in a certain fashion members who are AIA members. They keep records for us, and they provide a function for architects. We all know that, but doing regulation, they don't. And so this is a regulatory issue, I think. But yes, having their support is critical. And I'll be glad off the record to go see if I can make that happen.
Rob.
Sticky, but I wanted to respond to this notion of using it in school versus use it in Vanderbilt. You can science and management, and it's not something that's registerable. but it's in the course. So when you start getting into regulating what title of the course, settling someplace, I mean, our goal here is it is disingenuous marketing to students, makes them want to come, but doesn't. I'd hate to start down that road with the word architecture, because we could start down it with the word engineering in a lot of places, and a lot of places are outside of our purview. They're outside of Tennessee, and what happens nationally in those regards. Sure, we can.
Go ahead. Stuart, I started out asking you to say it makes a lot of noise. Stuart, what do you think? I mean, I'm just, again, but then I'll go ahead.
Well, I mean, to answer your question, I can't fully answer your question right now. I mean, it's something that we would have to research, look into, and maybe do a memo or something. But the issue is that this board has a responsibility of protecting the public of people practicing. So like what was mentioned is, you know, the student is not practicing, but somebody can come out there and practice thinking that they're an interior architect or something like that, then the board has the responsibility to protect the public, and we have that in place already through our rules and laws. So I just think there's an issue with the whole practicing part.
So that's part of the question, though, that I would have is how many people coming out of school believe that they can do this? And I would say the same thing on engineering management or other things that are led to believe I've got the title engineer or engineering management in my skill set, I can become an engineer. And I'm not doubting it doesn't happen. There's universities that make that very clear, and I'm sure there's universities that don't make that so clear. So I wonder how much of that is happening, and it seems like it could be a real possibility that somebody comes out of a interior architecture program and thinks, hey, I can go practice architecture, which could be a disaster on any level. So my thought process is, if that's something that has the potential, and we don't know who's not doing it. I mean, we just don't know because it's not reared its head, but we have a lot of people that are incorrectly using the term engineering or architecture or whatever that has reared its head. So, I mean, I think we've got at least some anecdotal evidence that says that it could be an issue. So I think it's, for us to not do anything as a board is not a good thing. Again, some universities, I think, Rob, do much better at saying, you can't get licensed, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. But some I'm not sure do. Some I think fill seats, and that's unfortunate. But it seems like that may be what's happening here. So I don't know. I'm just a question and something to think about.
Well, we've had a number of interior design firms that we have very quickly recognized they have offered interior architecture. And we have addressed it immediately, saying you must take that down off of your website. It is not part of your scope of services. You're not qualified to do that. So those have, in most cases, it's innocent because of this new nomenclature of interior architecture being the title of the programs from the universities. So it may be that the accreditation organization is the one that's causing the greatest issue with this by allowing programs to take on the title of interior architecture, change the name from interior design to interior architecture. So that may be the organization that I need to have that conversation with. And that may be the organization that I start with, find out why they have allowed this change of language, because the university programs are not just automatically changing. They are getting approval from the accreditation body. And so, the other thing is that in the state of Tennessee, anyone can call themselves an interior designer. But because of the registration, when you register, your title is registered interior designer. So this is a sort of a process. It's a rather ugly process, but we as professionals, interior designers, we go through this every now and then. We went through it back in '93 where we tried to get a unified voice, and the organizations couldn't come together and agree upon what interior designers were. And so this again dilutes who we are as a profession and causes continued confusion. So it may be that for discussion purposes, we recognize as a board that it is a concern. And it may be such that I go to CETA, the accreditation body, do a little more research, figure out what is happening and why they are allowing this and what the path is, before we make a statement, I guess, as a board, or do any action. And then let's just see what the process is.
Thank you, Ricky. One is, again, I go back to what Robert said, and I agree. The only way we're going to know that somebody is using that appellation is somebody files a complaint against them. Well, I'm not sure in this particular case, if we know there's that potential to occur, and we know that because these universities are referring to this curriculum as interior architecture, why couldn't we just write a letter as the board advising them that what our laws and rules say about using the appellation without the appropriate licensure and registration? We're not condemning them, or we don't even have to issue any letter of concern. It's just an informational letter advising them of what our rules say, and that there is some potential that if someone goes out and opens, they graduate with their 4-year degree and they go out and open up their own shop and they print business cards up and put on their website that offering interior architectural services, and we may never know, or unless we never know about that unless they receive a complaint, but they will have somewhat been misled about what their actual practicability is, and they will have misled clients too because of what the school is actually referred to as. So I think if we have the opportunity to head that off by just making them aware of what our rules say and helping them understand what the potential recourse or a negative impact of them continuing to refer to themselves as a school of architecture, or even if it's interior architecture, would be, I'm not sure how I understand how that falls outside of our purview. Thank you.
Rob, do you have a comment? Okay. No comment. Okay.
I'll just say, as an example, we have a lot of young people that come from K-State, their degree is in architectural engineering, but they focus on mechanical, electrical, structural, and it's ABET accredited, and they get registered. But that's, if you look on their diploma, that's what it says. Now, does that qualify them to be an architect?
You know, Tennessee State offers that same degree. They're one of 7 in the country, I think, that does.
Well, I'm fine with writing a letter, but I think our mission is to protect the public welfare and what the school, how they write their syllabus. That's like sweeping the beach.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it's as you have pointed out, it gets muddy pretty fast. The one thought listening to this too that I wonder, I think your suggestion of just checking with CETA and seeing what goes on, it also makes me think of the other architecture boards around the country and interior design boards. Have any of them taken action? I mean, I'm not saying that would necessarily say if we're the first one to ever take some kind of action and write a letter that we don't do that, but it would be good to know that we're the first. So all of this makes me wonder whether other boards have taken any kind of action, and if so, what was their action?
I can ask CETA, and I can also ask CIDQ if their position is and what they have learned from other states and what other states are doing, other boards are doing. I'll inquire. Very good point.
Okay, any other discussion? Yes. Frank.
There are people
there's 2 more over here.
There's people on this side.
All right. I'm shifting focus.
Yeah, a couple of comments. It appears to me, since the university is having each student sign a disclaimer letter, that they're aware that what they're doing is not right. To me, that's the other part of this that concerns me. And my first thought was that we just write a letter saying we don't like this, just being short. However, I do know that Tennessee isn't the only state that has universities and colleges that have curriculum that call itself interior architecture. And so if we make Tennessee take it out, let's say we did, is that hurting Tennessee's ability to attract students? So I don't want to just jump into it without actually trying to go through, CIDQ or, because if we do that, and every other state in the world has interior architecture, and you're a student and want to get your degree in interior design, it sounds sexier, for lack of a better term, to have your diploma say you graduated in interior architecture than interior design. People that know interior designers know that's not the case, but it's advertising, it's marketing. It's what it is, if you ask me. But I would be concerned to do that and put Tennessee at a disadvantage.
Other comments?
I'm curious, is this something that's primarily in the southeast United States where this is occurring, or is it all over the U.S.? So it's a movement that we're not going to control. All we can control is what our rules and regulations and statutes and so forth say. So, to me, that's sort of where we need to sit. But I like the idea of telling our universities, those within our state, within our boundaries, telling them or informing them that it's problematic on the licensing side of things. I don't know how you do that, but I like that idea of informing them, because I really think we're doing, to a great degree, a disservice to the students that are thinking they're getting something a little bit different. But I liken this to when I first landed in Tennessee, I had a a friend who from the University of Memphis had a degree in engineering technology, and he was livid that he could not be licensed as an engineer because, and I can't say to this, I can't say today, it may be a program that is licensable or what, but at that moment it was not. And it was a real problem, you know, and he was just livid by that. So I think that we're doing the students a real disservice. But I think that goes all the way around in landscape architecture, and I'm sure landscape architecture gets brought up because you have architecture at the end of the designation and landscape on the front end. But I have never seen a landscape architect call themselves an architect, not once in my days. But I see clients and people who will approach me and I'll introduce myself as a landscape architect, and next thing I hear out of their mouth is, well, my architect's here. And I always stop and correct them because I am not an architect. But I think I'm about as ethical as a person as you'll find too. I think there are plenty of people out there who may take that advantage, you know. So it's problematic all the way around. But as a board, I don't know how we can only regulate what our rules and statutes say, and that's where it really gets muddy. So that's all.
Fine, if I just, oh, sorry. I was just going to give a little bit of context. Maybe that might be helpful. So we see this a lot with the accountancy board. We regulate CPAs and their firms. And you have a lot of individuals who have accounting degrees, and then they go out after college and they never take the CPA exam or become a CPA, but then they'll, open up a business and call it so-and-so's tax and accounting services. And then that is, at that point, when we have that title, that's when the board can open a complaint. And usually it's harmless. The person says, well, I have an accounting degree. I didn't know that was a violation. So what we'll do in that situation is send a letter of instruction just saying the board seeks to remind you of TCA so-and-so. And then we will state that part of the law that does have the prohibition of using that language. And most respondents are very, they receive that well. So anyway, I just want you all to know that it does happen in other professions, and I'm more of, just from a legal perspective, kind of the opinion that we can't do anything until you start assuming the title. I would be cautionary about, writing letters, but I do think it might be appropriate to say, in that language, the board seeks to remind you, this is our statute on using the term architect. This is our statute on using the title registered interior designer. And that could be something, just so that people are clear on what our laws state.
Maria, are you saying that's something that we can do now and before there's some sort of a complaint filed?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's an information, it's an outreach type thing. It's getting ahead of the curve. This is what our law states. And I've seen it. So, sometimes there's questions there was a question recently about an accrediting agency, whether or not our board would accept that. And, we put something on the website just as, an FYI to consumers, to applicants, to licensees, this is the law. And so it's not creating anything new. It's just saying this is the law, and that's true.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I'm sorry. Right. Can we as a board then ask you to create a letter and bring it back at our next meeting for review?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And I'd also I don't want to surpass Michael or, the administration. So I'd like to check to see their position on this and what they would like to do. But I'd be happy to compile the law that states, what titles are appropriate for what professions and provide that to you all.
Would it be appropriate then for this board to make that recommendation pending the review of the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance?
I think let's get some more information. Let's see what Maria has, and then also see what comes from what Melanie does, and get our ducks in a row before we go write something out and make sure.
That's what I'm saying. If she can do it, and if she runs it up the flagpole and through the appropriate levels of the Department of Commerce and Insurance, they say, yeah, it's okay, we can do this, then she can draft it and have it ready for us at the next meeting. If not, she can tell us why we can't.
I think we can have it the next meeting. Not in action right now. just have something ready for us to review at the next meeting. I mean, I think that's
what you're saying, right?
Okay. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I thought you were saying we need to vote on something.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying, can the board ask her to do that? We don't need an official. I don't think we need an
Yeah,
official.
no, I wrote it on my to-do list, so that's better than a
Okay.
vote.
To-do list.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay. Okay. Good discussion. Any other comments? Melanie, that was the best committee report. I mean, for our first in-person committee report I've ever heard. Those were all very meaty topics, all of them. So.
But we had been holding on to those topics for quite some time.
Okay. Building. Okay.
Yeah. So thank you all very much, though, for the conversation and the discussion on the interior architecture language. It's a very important concern and issue, and so I appreciate the support and the input. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, we're moving to you, engineer committee.
You got a lot to live up to.
Yeah.
I don't want to follow that. Not won't be that long. As you probably recall, Michael asked the engineering committee some time ago to look at creating alternative paths to licensure for engineering, and we've been. I think this goes back to December or maybe before, but we've probably met at least 4 hours each month. We've been meeting, on our regular meeting and then the off month also. But we're making some progress. We met on April the 28th. To remind you, we're discussing creating a pathway for the technology degrees that Blair, you just mentioned, to become licensed. We also are trying to create a pathway for students who get a master's degree in engineering but not an undergraduate degree in engineering. We are looking at foreign degrees, and we are still talking about decoupling, which, as you know, our current law requires you to get your 4 years of experience and then take the principles and practice exam. We reviewed several drafts, and finally Maria stepped in and bailed us out and drafted a revision to the Tennessee Code, which was routed around by email at the end of April, 1st of May, and the committee has approved that draft. And as I understand that, Maria is taking that through the process in the department for review for inclusion in the governor's package for the legislature next session. You need to add anything to that, or is that?
That is all, yeah.
Okay, great. We also met yesterday, and we had a couple of applicant kind of issues to deal with. One applicant requested an extension, which we approved. Another person who's not an applicant yet had a question about it's a foreign degree, and this individual was short in some biology and chemistry, physics classes. We discussed that and provided some direction. We also dealt with a question from Dr. Smith where he was suggesting with foreign degrees that we create an alternative way to achieve those deficiencies. We discussed that. Actually, Rob and Ricky worked on some guidelines, but in the end, after several minutes of discussion, we decided to leave that alone and deal with those on a case-by-case situation because Tony had given us a recommendation that outlined what latitude we had with those kind of considerations. And I think that's the extent of the engineering committee report, unless one of the engineers wants to add something. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any comments? Any additions, questions? Okay, great report.
Ricky, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Oh.
I feel like I keep butting in because Michael's not here.
Please.
We have Assistant Commissioner Alex Martin joining us today.
Okay, great.
And I don't know if you just wanted to say hello.
Please do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Still not familiar with this boardroom since I've only been here a few times. So thank you, Maria, for that introduction. I just wanted to take a minute to pop down and see you all and introduce myself. As Maria said, I'm Alex Martin. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Division of Reg Boards. Hate that Michael couldn't join us this morning. I know he's disappointed he had to miss. But I just want to say, first of all, it's so great to have all of you here with us this morning. We're really excited to have all of our board members back. Certainly appreciate the perspective and the time that you all put into this work. And as I just got to witness some lively conversation for a committee report, so I was glad to get to see that. A couple other things I just wanted to mention quickly. It's a very exciting time for our division, as most of you know. So a lot of work for us to do. We've had some major changes come out of this previous legislative session that are exciting for our division. The Reg Boards Modernization Bill is going to return a lot of efficiencies to our division. We're excited to be working on implementing those changes and also some additional changes into the program structure that we've had with a merger bill. Also want to acknowledge the work that this particular group and the engineering committee has done in looking at expanding pathways to licensure and the decoupling piece as well. So certainly appreciate that proposal, and we look forward to taking that forward through the legislative process. For those of you who don't know me, prior to this role, I was in the governor's office for 2 years working on appointments to boards and commissions just like this one. Had the job of twisting arms and asking people to serve on boards just like this. And I know how much the governor appreciates folks from the outside being willing to serve. Everyday Tennesseans, if you will, who are going to interact with government and bring an outside perspective. So I just want to say that we appreciate you all, and hope that you know that I have an open door, and any time that I can be helpful, or you have concerns or issues you'd like to address with me or bring to our attention, we're happy to work with our board members and appreciate the partners that they are. So thank you, Maria, and sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. Okay. And before we move on to the next agenda topic, backing up a little bit about the conferences, I will mention, I know we talked about Michael going to the NCEES meeting for the engineers, but I'll mention that Maria is slated to go with the surveyor board, and so that will get benefit from that too. So very happy for that. Let everybody know that.
Ricky, also I'd like to mention that I'm going to the NCARB conference in LA at the end of this month, and I think Michael is planning to attend that as well. So just for the record, I don't know if any of the architects will be seeing me there, but
Great. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to old business. There's definitions under old business. Blair, is that you? I know we touched on it.
Yes, as your new chairman of the definitions committee, I would really recommend we get started on this again, get this back in place. So it is my hope that at our next board meeting, prior to the next board meeting, the committees can be honing in on definition, what have you. And I would really like in October, when we have our session in October, that gives us more opportunity to have a further and deep discussion about these, and potentially be prepared at that time to finalize where each of us are with our definitions. And I believe that dovetails in pretty nicely with NCARB's definition, which I think is August, is when the
meeting Maria's going to.
So it's up to Maria.
That's where it's going to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take great notes.
Okay. But that's really all I have. I just want to get this moving, and I know we're all working on the definitions, but if we can put a goal in front of us, that would be, I believe, helpful.
I should probably know this. Did we replace Kathy, somebody in charge of the engineering definition? Did we name an engineer? It was not.
No,
I will say that for
no,
sure.
I don't remember.
I can
us
either do
doing
this
that.
or that.
I don't remember that we ever did
Okay,
that.
I don't. Yeah, I know we kind of finished with it, so I don't know if we need one. But Blair, I don't know if we need somebody to sit in those committee meetings. So just
Are you asking for a volunteer? Because if you are, I volunteer Steve.
I was. That's an awesome volunteer.
When are you planning on meeting next? When are you planning on meeting next? Blair, next monthly meeting?
Right before our, let's see, we are in, what are we in? We're in June, August, wait a minute, July, August.
The August is next meeting, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think we need to have somebody on that committee before they meet, and go ahead and we'll appoint Alton, if that's okay with the other engineers. He's volunteered.
Okay, I volunteer.
Okay. We just need to have somebody on the committee, right? Before we start.
I agree, we do.
And if you find that it's something that you can't handle or whatever, then let us know and we'll try our best.
Is this an endorsement from you?
Just trying to get your way out, bro.
I can't argue that.
I'll second that.
If Robert endorses me,
I don't know if we need to vote on it or not, but that sounds good.
And we don't have an official
Alton, you
meeting.
agree?
We don't.
You agree to be on the committee?
I agree to be on the committee if you'll have me, Mr. Chairman.
Well, yes, we'll absolutely have you.
Okay.
Absolutely. So with that, we need to add Alton's name to the list. And if we could also, just as a general idea, get another update to our list out of various committees, I think that will be helpful for me as well. So let's plan to meet if we'll put on the agenda for our next board meeting to have a definitions committee meeting.
Blair, can I ask that there have been several versions of each definition for each discipline. And I know we're not anywhere near being done, but if everyone could send me like their most recent version of what they have for their specific discipline, that'd be helpful. Just so I can review and then offer feedback in the course of the committee meeting.
Yes.
Just so I can, be helpful in that way. I have the interior design at this point, but
Okay.
just the most recent, that'd be great.
Did we get the latest that Kathy had? Have we got that? Have you got that in hand, Alton?
Yes, I think so. I know she sent it out to all of us in that final review. And I've got that. I think I've got that in my file.
I want to say it was version 7.
It
Does
was
that sound
version
right?
7.
7.
Sounds right.
So if you can, will you send that to Maria?
I'd be glad to, or else I
Or
could.
Michael?
I'll do it however you want to do it, Maria. How about I
Are
send
we-
it to Michael and copy you?
Fine. That's great. Thanks.
Okay.
Likewise, on the architectural side, you'll.
It seems like the way we're required to do things now is to send them to Michael and he
Right.
distributes them.
You can always send them to me too, just as the attorney. We have that attorney-client
Yeah.
privilege,
Oh,
so
he'll
no
let us
worries
do
there.
that.
Anything you want to pass on to me, but yeah.
Yeah, just for the newer members, we're not encouraged to send emails to each other. And you really don't have to act nice to the other people on the board either. That's kind of discouraged too. Okay, any other old business to go over? Okay, new business.
You start. So you have in your packet the redacted bid specifications. So I've got a couple reasons to want to talk about this. Number one, this happened in this was obviously in a school. Part of it didn't look like it was redacted, but whatever.
Robert, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Is this going to take a while?
Oh, you need to go back there?
Yeah.
It may take a while, but
Yeah.
by the time, let's go. Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, let's take a break.
I think we'll have some discussion off this.
Okay.
I think that may go a long way. Sorry about that.
7-minute break. How's that? That's 2 better than 5. 7 minutes. I guess electronically back. We okay? Okay. Thank you. So we are in new business, and Robert, you have the floor. if you're ready.
Yeah. And this kind of comes from what we talked about. This is a set of, again, these are called bid specifications. I mean, that's what the engineer said that they prepared. That's what the owner said that they had. And my question is, again, this is not our bid specifications are for different things, but I really, when I start looking at this, I just don't see a lot of detail to them. I don't see a measurement and payment section. I don't see, in my opinion, again, it looks like the engineer leaves a lot of things up to the contractor to go decide. There's no, and we've had this discussion before about retrofits where you have different units, especially on roofs that may weigh more or less, different configurations that could create some structural issues. And it just doesn't seem like that this, what we would call this as specifications. And again, I just, and maybe this is the way in something that I'm not familiar with, it's done, but I would just like the board to kind of, the reason I'm even bringing this up is this something that's acceptable, and I just need to calibrate myself to what is or is not. And in their scope of work, they basically say that we're not preparing a construction document, but a bid specification is a construction document in the world I'm in. So I reckon that's why I'm asking the question.
Okay. Any comments? Rob, I was thinking you'd be a good one.
I do this for a living.
Yes.
Robert and I have talked about this.
Just now, though, just make sure that it's
just now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I don't want us to get sunshine over here.
Yeah. And Robert, I love you. I mean, I'm telling you. I do think he is. Two things about this, and all I've got in front of me is the document they prepared. But number one, the owner did not complain. And I don't know what they contracted for, but is it our business to go someplace where there wasn't a complaint? And number two, I don't think this work requires a stamp set of drawings. Robert said that maybe there was some federal money involved in help, and the federal grant required an engineer, but the project was to replace a bunch of through-the-wall units and rooftop units with the same size unit that was there before. And generally, people do that all the time without calling an engineer. They go to the folks who maintain their building and say replace the unit. So I don't think that this is something that they're to take up. And it's sketchy, but not without knowing what they contracted for, what they expected, and obviously they got what they expected, or they would have filed a complaint. I'm not sure we have any business reprimanding somebody for doing work when we don't know what they were contracted to do.
Good comment. I will add that this kind of falls in what we do too. And there is, I think, a policy that we have about it. Is this public money?
It appears to be.
System. If it's a school system,
school system, and
it's public money.
Yeah,
there is. Rob's right. I mean, but usually it's maybe 4 or 5 rooftop units. There's a people replace them as they die with this kind of equipment, and anything old around it. But there is has been a policy, I believe, that had a $50,000 limit as of, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, and that was enlarged to $100,000, that a public entity could do up to $100,000 of replacement work without actually getting engineering. But when it's over that amount, that it needs to be engineered, I believe. I think that probably needs to be researched more. Steve?
It's not a policy. It's in the code.
It is in the code.
Yeah.
Okay.
The amount has changed through the year, and I know that because I work for government, and we do, in addition to roads and bridges and other civil engineering kind of things, we assist not through design but through management of consultants for our municipality to replace those kind of units on fire halls and rec centers and that kind of thing. But Stuart may know right offhand, but I think it's titled public work or something like that. But it details, it says that no work over a certain amount involving structural, electrical, mechanical needs to be done under the purview of a licensee.
And I think the amount is now $100,000.
Well,
it
was 25, and then it was 50. The 100, I think there was a special exemption for state parks.
You're right. You're right. It's the 100 was state parks, and otherwise it's 50. And so there may
we can confirm that, or Maria can confirm that, but I think it's 50 now.
That's what the policy says, and then the 100,000 is for the state park.
Not a policy; it's in the code.
It's code and policy.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion. It's on the website as a policy, but it's an excerpt of the code.
It actually is. Okay. So anyway, it is something we have that says they do have to have registered professional designing, because this amount of work is certainly going to be over $50,000. And my view on it is, I don't think this spec meets a standard of care, and I know that that kind of have to wade into that on a equipment replacement, but I can say that our experience doing, if it's not an exact 1-to-1 replacement and it's not kind of a small quantity, the state of Tennessee always hires design professionals to do equipment replacements or of this quantity, and there are always complications. I've never seen one of these without complications ever, that can cause somebody a lot of problems if they're not worked through, whether it has to do with the electrical characteristics or weight, as you mentioned, or it can be anything, the shape of it, the size, fitting in an existing. There's just always a lot of details to tend to. So I think, my view is that this outline spec doesn't meet standard of care for something that's supposed to be by code, designed by a design professional. Alton.
Robert, do we know whether or not there were plans that went along with this? And sometimes on plans, people put a lot of detailed specifications on their plans.
As a matter of fact, one of the caveats in their scope, and I was trying to open that up at the same time and look, try to read it. It says somewhere in here, anyway, they're not supposed to provide construction plans or construction documents, and I need to find that exact wording. But there were no plan sheets provided. Stuart and I asked several times for the complete set of documents, and this was all we got. This and an RF and a scope of work proposal sent to the owner.
The scope of work, how specific was the scope of work?
It would be a standard contract that you would send to a client, terms and conditions, billing rates.
But usually in there, you kind of at least somewhat define the scope of work.
I mean, it had specify the requirements for complete change out of units, provide design intent for all necessary HVAC piping as required, review electrical power distribution to new systems where electrical devices are required to be replaced. It's understood that construction document plans are not required for the scope of work. Let's see here. Prepare specifications for bid solicitation of HVAC unit replacements. So, and again, when I kind of go look at these, review electrical power distribution, where electrical devices are required to be replaced, and then I go down in the specifications and see something electrical, and they've got 5 bullet points. And they're generic, not per. I mean, you would at least think for each unit they're replacing, they'd say, okay, for unit number 1, you're going to put this kind of connection. Or what, I mean, to me, it appears that way. And again, I may be provide new electrical circuits for new equipment.
And I would go back and ask Ricky and Rob, who are both mechanical engineers and have electrical engineers that work with them, would this be a normal type document that you would put out for a job like this that involved, looked like dozens of unit replacements and the associated ductwork and electrical work and gas piping and structural analysis to make sure that would be sufficient on the roof structures could support it, etc.?
Like over 100. I mean,
$1.5 million worth of work just for.
We would not do this as a construction document, but my question is, Robert, you just read something that said this was not intended to be a construction document. It's just a.
It says, oh, crap. Understood that construction document plans are not required for the scope of work.
And I understood that, but my question was a bigger question than that. I mean, if you were handed this project and you were asked to give a scope of work, would you have said, either of the two of you said, my scope of work will not include the preparation of construction documents or plans?
I think that if it were to prepare a scope that would go to a design build contractor somebody would need to do design, but by what's in our code, somebody has to do a design that meets the standard of care. And so if it's not us, we would have to understand that they do understand somebody has to do it. And I don't know that didn't happen here.
But if I understand correct, this was not a design build. This company was designing and performing. It was a design bid build project, correct, Robert? Okay.
I have a question. Say your question again.
If a client brought this project to you and said, give me your scope of work, we've got over 100 units to replace at multiple schools throughout this county, would this be the scope of work that you would have provided, and would you think that would have met any sort of normal standard of care in provision of engineering services?
No, we wouldn't have done this under any circumstances, but I've seen it a lot. And then let me say this: if you as an owner came to me and said, "I want to replace all these units, and I want you to solicit bids, oversee the work, and I don't need any construction documents," and they said, and we said back to them, there are 3 contractors that we know that will take care of this and do it right, and we know them, we trust them, and like anybody else. But it would be under a very specific set of the owner might have their own sophisticated construction people that are going to look at for themselves. So without knowing a lot of things, I would say generally this is not great. And if this sounded like this was just put it in the newspaper and solicit all comers, this is sketchy.
And before you ask Frank, just one quick question, because you and I were talking. This does have the Davis-Bacon requirement, so that's why I inferred that there was federal money or some other grant money in store for this.
Frank?
I've got several questions, but basically what they're doing is replacing a bunch of old units. Well, to me, that right there is a real problem in that the old units were probably built under a different code. And so there's no mention in here of anything about, outdoor air requirements or the SEER of the unit or anything to meet, the International Energy Conservation Code. So there's one issue I don't even see in what I've got even addressed. Another question is, this person that sealed this, are they a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, or structural engineer? What are they?
I don't know the answer to that because they didn't seal it. That's part of the problem. They didn't stamp any of this.
Oh, okay.
And we've already kind of talked about that earlier.
Right.
But I didn't go into in depth to see what kind of expertise they had.
If this carried forward, I mean, it's like everybody's saying, the contractor's the designer. And, there is one thing, all permitting required to begin work and complete the project is part of the RFP here, or specification. So even a contractor, if he has to go get a permit, he doesn't have a designer, he's probably going to be required to have. So that may be a little help to this, whoever did this, but yeah, it's really dangerous to do what being asked here. It's like when you mentioned structural requirements. I mean, when you say replace an old unit with a brand new one that's just like it, that's rare that happens. It's rare they weigh the same. A whole lot of reasons.
Rare that they would fit on the same curb.
Yeah, I've seen that. Here's the curb. Here's the unit. Sorry.
You don't fit in our
and then they
cubicles
make
anymore.
something work.
You're right.
The other thing is there's a note in there about coordinate the alarm service. Fire alarm. This is educational. This is a school. I mean, the fire alarm system. Really doubtful if this was built under an older code that the fire alarm requirements aren't different and are new. So new electrical circuits for quote new equipment. Ask it really not a specification. This is just a basic listing of here's a project we need to do, and that needs to be given to a designer to design it.
Palmer, did their scope of work have any?
Top drawing review, yeah. That's what I was trying to get to. Is provide shop drawing review for all equipment, review of submittals for each trade, respond to RFIs as required for bids, review of Davis-Bacon Act and relating acts, payment of wages for contractors and subcontractors performing work on this project.
I mean, the owner and the designer?
Yes.
That's a great point about the outside air. Just to use an example, that it's pretty common to find existing units that may not have any outside air at all. And so when you provide outside air that the code requires, that changes the electrical. It changes a lot of things, size of the unit. And one of the purposes that we developed a standard of care for sprinkler design was so that to protect owners from themselves, so that they didn't have these huge scope changes once you got into the submittal process and construction. And that's where this is headed, is these things won't be discovered until submittal time or probably later, probably during construction. So I think that's the purpose of the requirements to have a design and a registered designer.
Robert, being a novice here, what action are you, or if any, are you proposing? I mean, are we proposing a letter, a fine, jail terms? I mean, kind of what are you expecting here?
Probably short of jail, but I do think that we are looking to see if this is something that a separate complaint should be opened by this board on. I don't know, competency may be the right word. A violation of standard of care may be a better thing, because the other part of this complaint, I tried not to, but I'll go ahead and respond. It appears that their fee was substantially less than what they got turned in by somebody else, and we all know how these things happen sometimes. I'm jealous of you kind of deal. But if you do have people out doing, quote, engineering work, and they're charging substantially less fee than somebody doing it correctly, then that's not a good situation at all. Because
how did you get that information?
Well, they put it in the complaint. The other people put it in the complaint. Well, actually the respondent put it in the complaint. It said, yeah, they're just mad because we charge less money than they would have. And the other people.
Where did the complaint originally come from?
The other engineering firm. But then the respondent said, oh, the only reason they're mad is because we charged a whole lot less money. Well, my thing, and then looking at these specifications, like we just kind of talked about, if all you're doing is kind of replacing units and the school could do it themselves, well, then why do we have to have an engineer? But if they're having an engineer and they're doing a substandard service, yeah, they can charge a whole lot less, like we see in some other cases, but then they're putting the public at risk potentially by acting like they're doing an engineering service, but it's really not. So I'll answer your question again. What I'm trying to see is this, from the board's perspective, sufficient enough that we should open another complaint, or should we just let it go and say, hey, it's, just some of the stuff that happens? And I'm not trying to be flip when I say it. I'm just saying that it just didn't look very complete, but I don't have all the detail. I mean, you all are around this kind of stuff more than I am. I'm just not.
And I will say that a complaint doesn't mean a person's guilty and that's it. A complaint is opened, and then one of the board members digs into the information to answer questions that we're all asking here, and really looks at our rules and comes to a recommendation on whether there is a recommendation about whether there should be a fine or not, discipline. And then it's brought back to the board, and the board has to vote on it. And that still doesn't end it. The respondent can say, I disagree with you and want to go to trial, basically. If I'm getting this process wrong, straighten me out. So it's not just hey, we're going to issue a complaint and that's the end of it. That's when it starts to be looked at in detail to make sure of what we're looking at. Alton.
Yeah, and I think based on what I've heard each of you say, and just from general perspective, what I think, and that this merits at least opening a complaint to be able to do some additional investigation to determine whether or not this rises to the level of some grievance, some problem. And I will say too, Rob, one of the things, I mean, it doesn't always necessarily involve a fine or a civil penalty. I mean, this could be something as simple as a letter of instruction, a letter of caution, or a letter of warning to these individuals. We may find that, okay, they weren't as thorough or comprehensive as they should be, but based on the scope of services that was dictated to them, they performed this. And in that case, we probably should tell them, you might not should have done that. You have this obligation to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and this doesn't rise to that level, and it could become in just a letter of warning or letter of caution.
Thanks, Elton. Robert? Oh, okay. Anybody, any other, I guess we, go ahead,
I
Blaine.
do have one comment, and this is way out of my area of expertise, but as I read this, it reminds me of a memo of understanding that a school system may just put together, assemble, and hand it over. And frankly, I think that as I read this, the last paragraph, let's go back, wait a minute, no. I think that I'm reading under 4 state license insurance requirements. The contractor shall have the state license equal to or greater than job amount, so on. I don't read in here that it doesn't say not to use a design professional, but I think had they included that in here, then we would be reading this entirely differently. Just a point that it just looks like a memo of understanding that you may have from an overall authority or a school system in this case, but they failed to mention the design side of it, because every bit of what I've heard from each of you say seems exactly correct. So that's all from the landscape architect.
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead, Rob.
based on everything I've heard, particularly the issue of over $50,000 by law requires an engineer.
Correct.
I would be in favor of opening. I mean, I'm assuming you open a complaint so that you can investigate.
Correct.
There's a lot we don't know here. It might be worth knowing.
Right. Right. And you're right. It does go on a lot, but when something comes right in front of us, we're obligated.
We weren't looking for it. It just happened on our desk.
We're obligated.
Okay.
Okay. Well, is there
One
go
short
ahead, Frank.
question.
Yeah.
For Robert, has this been done?
I would assume. Let me see here, Frank. Just based on, I don't know. They went. I don't know, because they went to bid in probably February of this year, 21st or 21. So it's a pretty good sized project. By the time you order stuff, get it set up, I mean, it's probably
underway.
I mean, I don't know how fast you can do.
I doubt it, because right now the order and delivery time on equipment materials is months out.
Yes, I mean, and it may have been even later than that. The bid went out. I was trying to see the bid, which was like and again, I know all bids have a advertisement in the paper. I'm trying to find it. Shoot, sorry. Basically, let's see, it was bids are open. This is what's crazy. Bids are open from 2/17/21 to 3/3/21. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's just. Yeah.
Something like that is 16.
My guess is their goal was to start when school let out. Now, whether that could actually happen is, I agree with y'all. You know, the lead times are high, and signing agreement.
Can't get the chips to go in cars or C units.
And submittal time always takes forever because you have to wade through, you know.
The reason I ask, if this was 2 years ago, it'd be interesting to know what the bid was and what the final number was.
That's
because I get the feeling this is a change order, you know, project. You know, they're going to bid this, and then they're going to turn around and say, well, we looked at all this, and it's really going to cost that.
Comment. Others? Is it time? Do we want to make a motion?
I didn't do it very.
I didn't hear you. You did. I heard you.
Well, why don't you make an official motion?
I make a
Rob?
motion that we open a complaint to discover more about this situation.
Hey, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any more discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that was new business. Do we have any other new business? We have a motion to adjourn then. Second?
Second.
We don't vote on that, correct? Robert's
Don't
Rule
have
of
to.
Order.
You can declare it as
Think
you
about
want
it.
to. I think.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.webex.com.
Must be.
Okay.